distinguished dignitaries on the dais and distinguished dignitaries in the audience, good morning to everybody. I'll just make a few points so that they become the subject matter of discussion in the course of the various sessions that you're going to have, which I've looked at, which moves from school education right up to higher education and technical education and involvement of industry in education. I think just as everything else in this country, we require, first of all, a change of mindset. I think the problem with our country today with respect to various problems that we face is that we are thinking of the future with the mindset of the past. And no country can move forward unless we think of the future by grasping the opportunities that we can realize in the future and with a new mindset. Let's take school education as a starting point. I think the definition of literacy in our country must change. I mean, the old definition of literacy still continues. We still have, a textbook system of teaching. We still have an examination system. We have the old methodologies where the teacher stands in the class, in front of the class and teaches. But all that needs to change. Learning is a far more collaborative process than ever before. The access to knowledge does not come from the teacher alone. The teacher is not the sole repository of knowledge. And with new technologies and with the internet, the world is in the hands of the kid if you give him the necessary wherewithal with which he or she can grasp the world. And digital literacy has now become an essential part of literacy. You cannot have a child grow up in school, move into college without digital literacy. And if you do that, you're actually emasculating the child in every possible way because he will not be able to deal with the challenges of tomorrow. So we need to think 10 years from now as to what the world will be 10 years from now. And then decide what our educational programs must offer, what the methodologies of teaching should be, and how we should move into the future. What is going to be the future 10 years from now? Well, I believe, for example, that 10 years from now, every kid is going to have an iPad. And that kid then will access knowledge from the iPad. But he may access all kinds of knowledge. And so we need to ensure that the kid is able to access, because the content that flows on the internet is very disparate. It's a tsunami of information which the child will not be able to discern for himself or herself as and when that information is accessed by the child. So what we should be thinking about is, number one, make sure that 10 years from now every kid has an iPad. That requires the government, for example, to ensure that that highway, that digital highway is created by us, and the last mile connectivity is made by us to ensure that the kid has access to the information that is available on the net. Now, we are in the process of doing that. We are in the process of connecting 250,000 gram panchayats with fiber optics, and that's a program which my ministry is at the moment implementing. And hopefully by 2014, we would have connected 250,000 villages. Now, when the 250,000 villages are connected by fiber optics, you can imagine the kind of information and the kind of data that will flow on that fiber optic network, on that digital highway. Now, we need to make sure then that there is a last mile connectivity that's available from the Gram Panchayat to every student in the village or wherever he lives. That's not an easy task. For that, you require access devices which are accessible and affordable. I mean, just like the mobile phone is an access device which has allowed 800 million people or whatever, 700 million people through voice telephony to connect with each other. This access device will connect the kid with the data that is available on the net. Now, what does that require? That requires a manufacturing capacity which will ensure that the access device is affordable and accessible, just like the mobile phone is. You can have the information highway and you can have the digital flow, but if you don't have the access device, the child will not be able to access information. So we need a setup through which manufacturing of access devices can take place. And this was my vision and dream behind the Akash, that then becomes the access device for every kid in this country, so that the kid can access information. Now, for that required manufacturing capacities to be built at home, which means you should have a prefab unit at home, which means the chip must be manufactured at home, because otherwise the access device will be far too expensive for kids to buy it. So the chip must be manufactured here. All the other components must be manufactured here. And so we must develop manufacturing capacities for access devices. But that's the future. If you do not plan 10 years from now, the world will move on and your kids will be where they are. So once you develop that access device, then the question is, what kind of content will flow on the highway? Now that is a very difficult proposition, because you can't have any and everybody flow any kind of content on the highway for the purposes of teaching, which means that you must regulate that content. Now, to regulate content on the digital highway is no easy task. It's one of the most difficult tasks. Now, we must begin to deal with the issue today. And Mr. Mantha sitting here, my former collaborator in the Ministry of Human Resource Development, is already trying to do that. And IGNU is also trying to do that. So you're going to have in the future courses and content that will be available by private entrepreneurs to school kids anywhere in the world for a price. Now, the more competition there is in the market, the lower the price for content will be. And ultimately, the child will be entitled to choose whatever courses the child wishes to choose and access the kind of content the child is entitled to access and wants to access for the purposes of his or her dream as the child moves on through school into higher education. Now, this is all easier said than done. What we need is collaboration of state governments. Unless state governments collaborate with us, we'll not be able to put this in place. We need collaboration of civil society. We need collaboration of the teaching community, because unless the teaching community also doesn't learn how to access the device, the teaching community will not be able to guide the child. We need a change of environment in the classroom. The teacher must be a teacher who believes in collaborative learning, and the teacher must understand the individual inclination and genius of each child, because each child might want to learn different things. So no longer will be a class which is integrated into a course system. The class will have to be a class in which each child is entitled to move where he or she wants to move, depending on his or her interest. Because remember, ultimately, if the individual is not able to travel on a course where he or she can discover himself or herself, that individual will never be happy in life. In the ultimate analysis, happiness is the end of all objectives of living. In the absence of happiness, there is no enjoyment, and you live in the world only once. So you can't force the child to learn something the child doesn't want to learn. Can't force the child to take on something the child doesn't want to take on, which means you must give choice to the child, which means that the element of democracy in the classroom should be much greater than it is today. The true meaning of democracy ultimately is choice, whether in the electoral system or in education. And you must give that choice to the child. Now, giving that choice to the child will depend on how much outside the classroom, what kind of content and what kind of infrastructure you are able to create outside the classroom. Some child may be interested in nature. I have 3 grandchildren or rather 4 grandchildren, and each of them think differently. One grandchild comes to the house and says, I want to look at the turtle, and I want to look at the cow, and I want to look at at animals. The other child is always looking at the net. He or she doesn't want to go out and look at the animals. A third child is desperate to learn languages, different languages. Now, each of them have different interests. Now, so in other words, the child should be able, as the child grows, to create his or her own content. And that child should be entitled to a degree or a school certificate based on that. So that he can, now, you need to then transform. I'm giving you this example to tell you what the future holds for us and what we need to do today to enable our children 10 years from now to move into a very competitive, a very different world, a world where each of us will be close to each other with any person around the world. Now, when you come to higher education, this choice must be reflected in higher education as well. Now, if you have the present university system, where you have academic councils and other councils controlling the university system, where there is no choice available, where there are 3 streams to move into the university system, it's not going to work. So you need radical reform, which means you need a new mindset through which you must look at higher education. Higher education must also reflect the same kind of choice. Now, this might sound like a dream, but the fact is this is how it's going to happen. You never imagined what the world would be today 10 years, 15 years ago. You never knew that we would have a true opportunity to move from the real to the digital world. Take, for example, public services. All our public services will be provided for digitally. Your water bills, your land records, your electricity bills, your passport, your banking system will all be available to you at your doorstep. You will have an ATM around the corner, and your phone will be a credit card. You will be able to credit your bank account through the phone. So everything, all public services will be digitally managed. And there will then be GIS technologies which will give you 3-dimensional view of so many things that you haven't seen before. That's how the world is going to be. So you need to change now. All this means that there has to be much greater emphasis on technology than it is today. Technology is the solution to most problems. Why? Because then there is no human interface. In the absence of human interface, you won't have discretion and you won't have corruption. Most of the corruption takes place because there is a human interface involved. If I target my subsidies through the digital world and take that subsidy to the individual, if it's a scholarship, ensure that his bank account is credited with the scholarship that he has. If it's 1 or 3 kilograms of wheat, to ensure that the person who is entitled and who belongs to the BPL category gets the wheat, so that the human interface in between, the ration shop, is eliminated. And the ration shop is obliged, because of technology, to ensure that the targeted individual gets the subsidy. Now, once you do that, then your corruption also will be minimized. I mean, you cannot ever eliminate corruption because that's human frailty. But you can minimize it, and the only way to minimize it is through. You can also deal with young girls who are attacked today with technology. We have solutions for that as well in technology, and I'm trying to build that one, and hopefully I will give one very soon to the people of my country. The point that I'm making is there has to be a passion about technology. If you really look at the history of the world, the developed world has moved on because of technology. That's why they are developed and we are less developed. The railways came because of technology. That's how goods moved from one place to another. The telephone came, which connected people around the world. Dynamite came. That was also a work of technology. And whichever mode of communication is more agile, that mode will always win. That's why the horse won over the elephant, because the horse was more agile. And that's why wars were won, because by people who had horses, and lost by people who had elephants, because they were less agile. Agility, mobility, communication is at the heart of human intercourse. And unless we grasp that, embrace that, and make it a part of our everyday lives, we'll not be able to grapple with the future. And this involves collaboration. It involves collaboration of all stakeholders in society. It involves collaboration of industry, because they are the ones who translate ideas into goods and services. So industry must be directly linked to academic institutions. Industry then will do R&D, and government also will do R&D, and they must collaborate with each other, which is why Mr. Mantha is collaborating with Microsoft, as I read this morning. Because unless you have that collaboration, you will not be able to get solutions. So industry collaboration, stakeholder collaboration, R&D, emphasis on technology, new mindset, changing the rules of the game, allowing choice at every stage in the life of the kid, whether he's in school or he's in higher education, and a change of mindset in politicians, that the time has come when we should look at the future not through the eyes of the past, but look at the future not even through the eyes of the present, but look at the future by having a dream of what the future will be in times to come. And those who realize that dream will be the winners, others will be the losers. Thank you very much.